No one in the studio knew what was about to happen. People were laughing, cameras were adjusting, and the warm lights of the opera show made everything feel safe and familiar. But behind that comfort, something powerful was waiting, something emotional, something that would make the whole world stop when Sandra Bullock walked onto the stage with a secret she had carried for more than 20 years. The moment she stepped out, the audience cheered loudly. Sandra smiled politely, waving softly, but inside her chest, her heart was not calm. It moved fast, heavy, almost painful. Today was not just another interview. Today was the day she would speak a truth she had buried quietly, a truth she thought she would take to her grave. But life does not always let you hide forever. Sometimes the past returns and asks for a voice. As she sat down across from Oprah, Keanu Reeves was backstage, quietly waiting for his part of the show. He didn't know what Sandra was going to say. He had no idea she had been holding something so personal. He simply believed this was another reunion interview, something warm, something fun. He couldn't have been more wrong. Oprah smiled at Sandra and said gently, "You look a little nervous. Everything all right?" Sandra took a slow breath. Her fingers trembled lightly on her lap. "Oprah," she whispered, "there is something I've never said in public, and I think today might be the day." The crowd leaned in instantly. Even Oprah looked surprised. Her eyes softened, sensing the weight behind Sandra's voice. "Take your time," Oprah said. "We're here with you." Sandra nodded, trying to steady herself. "This is about someone very important to me, someone I respect deeply, someone who changed my life without ever knowing it." Oprah tilted her head. "Do we know this someone?" Sandra's eyes filled with quiet emotion. "Yes," she whispered, "everyone knows him." The studio grew quieter than ever before. Sandra placed her hand over her heart. "This is about Keanu." A wave of gasps filled the room. Backstage, Keanu froze. He had been sipping water, but when he heard his name from the monitor, he stopped mid-breath. Something in her tone felt different, serious, emotional. His heart moved in his chest. Oprah leaned closer. "Keanu Reeves." Sandra nodded again, this time with a small, painful smile. "Yes, Keanu Reeves." The silence in the room grew heavier. Sandra's eyes glistened softly, her voice lowered, fragile yet steady. "I have never told anyone this," she said, "but there was a time in my life when I loved him, not just liked him, not just admired him. I truly, deeply loved him." Oprah covered her mouth, as did nearly half the audience. Backstage, Keanu felt his heart hit the floor. He sat down slowly, his chest tight, his mind racing with memories, moments on set, quiet conversations, the gentle bond they once shared. Sandra continued, her voice shaking as if she was touching a part of herself she had avoided for years. "I never said anything because life happened. Timing was wrong. I was scared. And he was everything good. I didn't want to ruin the friendship we had." Oprah whispered, "Sandra, this is huge. Why now?" Sandra looked down at her hands. "Because I'm tired of hiding feelings that shaped me. I'm tired of pretending that part of my heart didn't exist. Keanu deserves to know he was loved in a way I never had the courage to show." The audience listened in breathless silence. But then Sandra said something no one expected. "And the hardest part," she whispered, "is that I think he never felt the same." Those words pierced the room like a quiet lightning strike. Backstage, Keanu stood up quickly as if someone had pushed him. His brows pulled together with emotion, not anger, but something deeper. He whispered to himself, "Sandra, how could you think that?" On stage, Sandra wiped a single tear. "Oprah, I'm not saying this for drama. I'm saying it because I want to honor something real that happened inside me, even if the world never knew, even if he never knew." Oprah reached across and held her hand. "This is brave, truly brave." Sandra let out a trembling breath. "I just hope he doesn't hate me for saying it." Backstage, Keanu took one step toward the stage. Then another's. Then another's. The show's coordinator tried to stop him. "Keanu, your segment is after commercial. You can't go out yet." But he shook his head, eyes full of something raw and unstoppable. "I need to go now," he said softly. He walked toward the stage door with steady, emotional steps. Because Sandra Bullock had just spoken a truth. And Keanu Reeves had one of his own. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the energy in the room shifted. Sandra's confession still hung in the air like a soft echo, touching every heart in the audience. People whispered to each other, unable to believe what they had just heard. Oprah herself sat in silence, stunned by the honesty of Sandra's words. But Sandra's mind was somewhere else entirely. She stared at the floor, her fingers trembling, her heartbeat uneven. She didn't regret telling the truth, but she feared the consequences. She whispered to Oprah, I hope he doesn't walk away from this." Oprah squeezed her hand gently. "Sandra, no one walks away from love that pure." But Sandra shook her head. "Keanu is kind, he's respectful, he protects his peace. I don't want to bring pain into his life." And then, before Oprah could reply, something unexpected happened. The side door of the stage suddenly opened. The audience gasped. Cameras swung toward the movement. Keanu Reeves stepped inside the studio early. Sandra didn't see him at first, but the crowd reacted instantly. Whispers grew louder, some people even stood up. Oprah turned her head slowly, her eyes widening with surprise. Keanu walked with slow, steady steps. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't dramatic, he wasn't angry. His expression was calm but emotional, like a storm hidden under a gentle sky. Oprah blinked. "Keanu, you're not scheduled yet." He nodded once, still walking toward them. "I know," he said quietly, "but I had to come now." His voice was soft, but the weight behind it filled the room. Sandra finally looked up. Her entire body froze. Keanu was walking toward her. For a moment she forgot how to breathe. Her eyes widened, tears pooling instantly. Her hands shook on her lap, and every memory she had shared with him rushed back. Late-night talks on set, warm laughter, the way he protected her when reporters pushed too hard, the gentle look he gave her during quiet breaks. She whispered his name without sound. He reached the stage and gently sat in the chair next to her. The whole studio went silent. Even the camera operators held their breath. Sandra could barely speak. "Keanu, I'm sorry, I didn't want you to hear it like this." He turned to her with soft eyes. "Sandra, why would you apologize for telling the truth of your heart?" Her lips trembled. "Because I never wanted to make you uncomfortable, or pressure you, or make you feel responsible for something that is in the past." He shook his head slowly. "Your feelings were never a burden." Oprah looked between them, speechless, sensing history unfolding right in front of her. Sandra took a slow, shaky breath. "Keanu, I said it because it was time, not because I expected anything from you." Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice low but steady. "And I came out here because there is something I need to say too." Sandra's eyes locked onto his. Her heartbeat echoed loudly in her ears. Keanu continued, "For years, people have asked me if I ever had feelings for you." He paused, his expression softening. "I always answered carefully, respectfully, but maybe I was too careful." Sandra blinked through her tears. "What do you mean?" Keanu turned his whole body toward her now, his voice quieted, gentle as a whisper. "I didn't know you loved me back then," he said. "I didn't know you felt anything more than friendship." Sandra swallowed hard. "I was scared to tell you." Keanu nodded, and I was scared to ask. A soft wave of emotion spread across the room. People leaned closer, some even wiped their eyes. Oprah whispered, "Keanu, are you saying what I think you're saying?" Keanu looked directly into Sandra's eyes. "Sandra, I cared about you too," he said softly. "Maybe in ways I never admitted, maybe in ways I didn't fully understand at the time." Sandra's breath caught. Her heart jumped painfully. She felt the world tilt for a moment before settling into a strange, emotional stillness. But before she could respond, Keanu added something that made the entire studio freeze. "And the truth is, I still care." Sandra's lips parted, but no words came out. The audience gasped loudly. Oprah leaned back, stunned speechless for the first time on her own show. Keanu reached out and gently placed his hand over Sandra's. "You were never alone in what you felt," he whispered. "You just didn't know it." Sandra's tears finally fell. She covered her mouth with her free hand, overwhelmed. "Keanu, why didn't you ever say anything?" He smiled sadly. "Maybe I thought you deserved someone braver than me, someone who could speak their heart without fear." Sandra shook her head, crying softly. "You were always brave, I just didn't know it." Their hands remained together. A silence filled the room, not empty, but full, heavy with unspoken emotions. Old love, missed chances, and possibilities that neither of them had dared to imagine until this moment. But the moment wasn't over, because someone, somewhere in the studio, captured an expression on Keanu's face. An expression that suggested he was about to reveal something even deeper. Something Sandra never expected, and something the world would replay for years. The studio was silent, so silent that even a breath could be heard. Sandra's tears glistened under the warm lights as she held Keanu's hand, her heart shaking with emotion she hadn't felt in years. She had confessed her truth, but what Keanu hinted at felt even heavier, even deeper, even more unexpected. Oprah leaned forward slowly, her voice gentle but filled with curiosity. Keanu, you said there is something more, something you never told Sandra. What is it? Keanu looked down at their hands for a moment. He brushed his thumbs softly over her fingers as if grounding himself. Sandra watched him closely, her heart pounding fast. She whispered, Keanu, whatever it is, just say it. He lifted his eyes to hers, and for a moment it felt like the entire world disappeared. There were no lights, no cameras, no audience, only the two of them sitting across from each other, holding 20 years of unspoken emotions between them. Keanu took a breath. Sandra, he said softly, there was a reason I never told you how I felt. Her brows pulled together. Why? Because, he whispered, I thought I wasn't good enough for you. The audience gasped in disbelief. Sandra blinked rapidly, stunned. Keanu, no, why would you ever think that? He looked down again, his voice quiet and honest. When we filmed together, you were already shining. Everyone loved you. Everyone admired you. You were confident and kind and full of life. He paused, then added softly, and I was still broken. I was dealing with things I never talked about, losses I didn't know how to carry. Sandra's eyes softened with deep compassion. Keanu continued, every time I looked at you, I felt this warmth, this peace. You made the hard days easier without even knowing it. But I didn't want to pull you into the shadows I was fighting. I didn't want my pain to dim your light. Sandra wiped her eyes again. Keanu, you were never a shadow, not to me, never. He took a slow breath. But I thought I'd hurt you if I let my feelings show, so I stayed silent, even when I wanted to say something, even when I wanted to reach for your hand the way I am now. Sandra squeezed his hand gently, her voice trembling. You didn't hurt me, you protected me, you always have. Oprah watched quietly, giving them space. Keanu continued, but the biggest reason I never said anything is because I didn't want to lose you. I was so afraid that if I told you how I felt and you didn't feel the same, our friendship would disappear. I couldn't risk losing you completely. Sandra shook her head, tears falling. Keanu, you never would have lost me, never. But before she could say more, Keanu did something unexpected. He let go of her hand. Not coldly, not with anger, but with a softness that made Sandra's heart stop. He looked at her with eyes full of something she didn't understand yet. There's more, he whispered. Sandra froze. More. Keanu nodded slowly. Something I kept to myself for years, something I should have told you, but I couldn't, not then. The room leaned in, breathless. Even Oprah's expression changed, sensing a deeper truth rising to the surface. Keanu looked down at his lap as if searching for courage. Do you remember the night we wrapped filming for our first movie? He asked. Sandra nodded slowly, her mind going back to that time. Yes, we all had dinner together. Everyone was celebrating. Keanu smiled sadly. After dinner, you walked me to my car. Her eyes widened a little. Yes, I remember that. Keanu continued. You hugged me. It was quick, gentle, but it meant more to me than I could explain. And that night, when I got home, I realized something. Sandra whispered, what did you realize? Keanu looked straight into her eyes, and his voice cracked softly as he spoke. That I was falling in love with you. The audience gasped loudly. Sandra's breath left her body. Her hand covered her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly with fresh tears, not of sadness, but of shock, of tenderness, of a truth she never expected to hear after 20 years of silence. Oprah placed a hand over her heart, visibly moved. Keanu continued, his voice breaking slowly. I stayed quiet because I thought you didn't feel the same. I thought it was only me. I thought I was alone in it. Sandra wiped her cheeks with shaking hands. Keanu, oh my God, I had no idea. But Keanu wasn't done. And the truth is, he whispered, I never stopped caring, even when life moved on, even when we drifted, even when we lived separate lives, that part of me stayed the same. Sandra stared at him, trembling. Keanu, why didn't you ever tell me? Why now? He swallowed hard. Because I thought you were happy, because I didn't want to bring back feelings that might hurt you. But now, Sandra whispered. Keanu looked at her with quiet intensity. Now, I heard your truth, and I realized the only mistake I ever made was staying silent. The audience sat frozen. Oprah wiped a tear, and Sandra, shaking, vulnerable, emotional, whispered the question that would change the direction of their conversation. Keanu, what do we do now? The moment felt like the entire world holding its breath. And the answer was something no one could predict. The studio felt heavier than ever. The lights seemed softer, the air thicker, and every face in the audience carried the same expression, shock mixed with deep, quiet emotion. Sandra sat frozen, her fingers trembling lightly on her lap, her eyes still locked on Keanu as if she was searching his heart for answers she wasn't ready to hear. She whispered again, Keanu, what do we do now? Keanu leaned back slightly, breathing slowly, as if steadying himself before walking across a fragile piece of glass. I don't know, he said gently. I just know I can't pretend anymore. Sandra wiped another tear, her voice shaking. Keanu, this is not easy. We have lived entire lives since then. We moved on. We built new stories. I don't want to damage anything in your life. Keanu shook his head softly. You're not damaging anything. You're giving me clarity, maybe something I should have faced a long time ago. Oprah broke her silence, her voice soft but clear. This is a moment of truth for both of you, but remember, honesty doesn't have to destroy. Sometimes it heals. Sandra turned to her. But what if it opens wounds instead? Keanu answered before Oprah could. Then we face them together. Those words hit Sandra's heart like a warm wave and a sharp strike at the same time. She looked at him with eyes full of years she could never rewind. Keanu, I don't want to lose what we have. Even now, even today, I don't want to ruin our friendship. He nodded slowly. I don't want that either, but keeping everything inside that ruined a part of us too. The audience murmured softly. They could feel the weight of every word. It wasn't just a celebrity moment. It was real, human, vulnerable. Sandra took a deep breath. Keanu, do you regret not telling me back then? He looked down for a moment, then lifted his eyes again. I don't regret loving you, he said softly. I only regret my silence. Those words pierced through the room. Sandra covered her mouth with her hand again, overwhelmed. Keanu, I was terrified too. I thought you would never see me that way. I watched you be so gentle with everyone. I didn't want to be one more person asking for a piece of your heart. Keanu leaned closer. Sandra, you never had to ask. You already had it. Her tears fell again. She couldn't stop them anymore. She didn't even try. So you loved me and I loved you and we both said nothing. He nodded, eyes glimmering with emotion. Yes, that's what happened. Oprah whispered softly. Two hearts waiting for each other at the same time, but standing still. The pain of that truth hung over them. But then something shifted. Sandra suddenly wiped her tears, straightened her back, and asked a question that surprised even herself. Keanu, if we both felt something, why didn't fate bring us together anyway? Why didn't it happen naturally? Keanu thought for a long moment before answering. Maybe, he whispered, because we weren't ready. Maybe we needed to grow separately. Maybe we needed to live our lives before we could face this moment. Sandra looked down, her voice barely audible. And what about now? Keanu's eyes softened, almost melting. Now we are here talking openly, honestly, and that alone means something. But before Sandra could respond, something unexpected happened. A voice suddenly called out from the audience, trembling, emotional and loud enough for the microphones to catch. Do you regret never trying? Everyone turned to look at the person, a woman standing near the back, tears on her face. I'm sorry, she said, shaking slightly. But I watched your movies for years. I watched your chemistry. I always thought there was something real. And now, seeing you both, I just want to know, do you regret not choosing each other? Sandra's heart clenched tightly. Keanu exhaled softly, his eyes deep with memories that still lived inside him. Regret, he repeated quietly. It's a heavy word. Sandra whispered, yes, it is. Keanu turned to face her fully now, his body angled toward her, his voice gentler than ever. I don't regret the life I lived, but I regret the moments I let fear speak for me. Sandra nodded, her tears falling again. Me too, she whispered. The woman in the audience called out again, do you still love each other, even after all these years? The entire studio froze. Even Oprah looked stunned, unsure whether this question would break the moment or reveal something deeper. Sandra looked at Keanu. Keanu looked at Sandra. Their eyes held each other for a long, silent moment. It felt like time had stretched, softened, and wrapped them in a warm blanket of truth. Finally, Keanu spoke first, but not with an answer, with a single, trembling question directed at Sandra. Sandra, do you want the truth, the real truth, the one I never dared say? Her breath caught in her throat. Yes, she whispered. The room leaned in. Keanu took her hand again, this time with both of his. And in a low, emotional voice, he began to reveal something he had hidden for decades. Something no one expected. The entire studio felt like it was holding a single breath. Sandra's hand rested inside Keanu's, warm and trembling. The audience leaned forward, almost afraid to blink. Oprah watched quietly, her heart in her eyes, knowing she was witnessing something rare, something honest, something that reached beyond fame or television. Keanu took a slow, deep breath. His hands tightened gently around Sandra's, as if he needed to feel her steady presence before sharing the truth he had carried for so long. He whispered, Sandra, there is something I never said, something I kept buried for years. Her voice trembled. Keanu, whatever it is, you can tell me. He nodded slowly. Do you remember, he began softly, the day we finished press for the movie and we walked out of that interview together? Sandra wiped a tear. I remember everything. Keanu stared at their hands, his voice barely above a whisper. That night, when we went our separate ways, I went home and realized something. Sandra's eyes softened. What did you realize? Keanu lifted her hand and held it against his chest, right where his heartbeat thumped softly. That I didn't want that to be the last time you walked beside me. Sandra's breath caught. The audience gasped softly. He continued, I didn't just like you, Sandra. I didn't just admire you. I wasn't just fond of you. I was in love with you. Sandra's whole face crumbled into a silent cry. Her free hand covered her mouth, overwhelmed, shaking from a truth she had once prayed for but never expected to hear. Keanu's voice carried a small break. And I thought about telling you, many times, so many it hurts, but every time I tried, something stopped me. Oprah leaned in. What stopped you, Keanu? Keanu looked up, his eyes glassy but warm. Fear, he whispered, and timing and life. I didn't want to step into your world and add pressure or risk the peace between us. You were shining, and I didn't want to complicate your path. Sandra sobbed softly. Keanu, you would never have complicated my life. You were the only calm I had some days. He squeezed her hands gently. But I didn't know that. I thought I was protecting you. She shook her head slowly. We were protecting each other but hurting ourselves. Keanu dropped his gaze for a moment, gathering courage. There's more, he said quietly. Sandra blinked, breathless. More. Keanu nodded. Something I've never told anyone. The room froze again. He whispered, there was a moment, a real moment, when I almost asked you out. Sandra looked stunned. When? Keanu smiled softly, sadly. During the reshoots, you were sitting outside your trailer, drinking that terrible coffee you always pretended to enjoy. A few people laughed gently through tears. You were reading a script and your hair kept falling in your face, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment. I should tell her. Sandra leaned closer. Why didn't you? Keanu let out a soft exhale, full of years of regret. Because someone called your name, and you stood up so fast, and you looked so happy to see them, and in that second, I thought you were in love with someone else. Sandra froze. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted in shock. Keanu, she whispered, that wasn't someone I was in love with, that was my assistant. The room gasped. Oprah covered her mouth. Keanu blinked, stunned. I didn't know, you looked so happy to see them. Sandra actually let out a soft, emotional laugh. Of course I did, they brought me lunch. I was starving. The audience laughed through tears. Keanu gently rubbed her hand. I misread everything, and because of that, I stayed silent. Sandra shook her head with a trembling smile. And I stayed silent because I thought you didn't see me that way. Keanu sighed deeply, two people loving each other but trapped by fear. She nodded yes. Emotion swelled in the room, like a warm storm ready to break. Oprah spoke softly. So, what now? What does this truth mean for the two of you today? Keanu and Sandra looked at each other again, long, steady, searching. Keanu's voice softened to a whisper. Sandra, I don't want to waste any more time hiding what I feel. Tears streamed down Sandra's face. Keanu, I don't want to hide any more either. The audience gasped again, this time with joy. Oprah clasped her hands, heart racing. Are you two saying what it sounds like you're saying? But before Keanu could answer, before Sandra could speak, the studio door opened again. A producer rushed in with panic in his eyes. Oprah, Keanu, Sandra, we have a situation. Everyone turned. The producer held a tablet in his shaking hands. There's something going viral online already, he said nervously, and it's huge. Sandra's heart dropped. What is it? The producer hesitated, then turned the screen toward them. Keanu and Sandra both gasped in shock. Because on the screen was a leaked video. A video from years ago. A video that neither of them knew even existed. A video that showed something no one was ever supposed to see. And it changed everything. The studio lights flickered slightly as the tension rose. The producer's nervous hands shook as he held the tablet out toward Keanu and Sandra. Oprah leaned forward, her face tight with concern. The audience grew completely silent, every heart pounding, every breath held. Keanu reached for the tablet with a calmness that didn't match the fear crawling inside him. Sandra moved closer, her shoulder brushing his, her fingers trembling lightly in her lap. The moment the screen turned toward them, their eyes widened. The video was grainy, clearly recorded without their knowledge, but the scene was unmistakable. It was them. Years ago. A behind-the-scenes moment from their first movie together, but not the kind the world had ever seen. In the video, Sandra was standing outside her trailer, the same location Keanu mentioned earlier. She looked nervous, twisting her fingers, almost pacing. Then Keanu walked into frame, holding something small in his hand. The audience gasped softly. In the video, Keanu approached Sandra shyly. Hey, he said awkwardly, handing her a tiny box. I saw this and thought of you. Sandra's eyes lit up in the video. She opened the small box, and inside was a simple silver bracelet with a tiny heart charm. Keanu, why? Video Sandra asked. Video Keanu rubbed the back of his neck. I don't know. You smiled at the crew today, and it made my whole week. I just wanted to give you something. The studio audience watching the leak began whispering, touched by the sincerity. On the tablet, the video continued. Video Sandra stepped closer to him, her cheeks pink. You always do that, she said gently. Make everything feel calmer. Video Keanu looked down, shy. Maybe it's because of how I feel when I'm around you. The audience gasped again. Keanu and Sandra in the present moment stared at the screen, frozen, shocked, emotional. In the video, Sandra whispered something so softly the sound barely caught it. Keanu, do you feel more? Keanu in the video hesitated, nodded, then stepped even closer to her. Yes, he whispered, I think I do. Then the video revealed the moment that changed everything. Video Sandra reached up, touched his cheek gently, and whispered, me too. The audience in the studio erupted in shock, hands covering mouths, tears forming in their eyes. Keanu and Sandra's real-life bodies went still. Because the video didn't stop there. It showed Sandra leaning forward, kissing Keanu's cheek softly, and Keanu pulling her into a quiet, long embrace. A private moment. A moment full of warmth. A moment that both of them had forgotten. But it wasn't over. There was one last thing. In the video, after they pulled apart, Keanu whispered, maybe in another life we could try this. Sandra answered with a soft smile, maybe in this one. The video ended. The studio fell into silence. Keanu lowered the tablet slowly, his hands shaking, his chest rising and falling deeply. Sandra stared ahead, her eyes full of tears, her face pale with shock. She whispered, I don't even remember that moment. Keanu, do you? He shook his head slowly. No, I was so lost back then. Maybe I blocked it out. Maybe I thought it was a dream. Oprah leaned closer, her voice soft, emotional. This video proves something you both never realized. Sandra wiped her tears. What does it prove? Oprah smiled sadly. That you didn't miss your chance 20 years ago. You had it. You had the moment. You both felt the same. Keanu whispered, but we forgot. Oprah shook her head gently. Sometimes the heart remembers, even when the mind doesn't. The audience nodded, moved. Keanu turned to Sandra again, their faces only inches apart. Sandra, all this time, I thought I missed the moment. Sandra placed her hand on his cheek, mirroring the moment from the video. Keanu, maybe the moment never left us. Maybe it waited. His eyes softened, breaking open with emotion. So, what do we do now? Sandra took a deep breath as her tears fell softly. We stop running from the truth. We stop hiding from each other. We give ourselves permission to feel everything we never allowed ourselves to feel back then. The studio burst into applause. Oprah wiped a tear. Sandra, Keanu, this is one of the most honest conversations I've ever seen on this stage. Keanu gently took Sandra's hand. So, is this our beginning? Sandra smiled through her tears, her voice soft and trembling. Maybe it always was. He leaned his forehead against hers, a quiet moment filled with years of tenderness. The audience rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, crying. Keanu whispered, Sandra, whatever happens next, I want it to be real. No fear, no silence. She nodded, holding his hand tightly. Yes, real. And for the first time in decades, their hearts finally moved in the same direction. Together,